On a hot, humid day in July of 1954, a routine international flight descended into Haneda Airport in Tokyo, Japan. The passengers who disembarked were a typical mix for the era – businessmen, diplomats, and a few wealthy tourists. They moved through the formal and orderly process of immigration and customs. But one of these passengers, a well-dressed Caucasian man, would soon become the center of one of the most enduring and baffling mysteries of the 20th century. When he handed his passport to the Japanese immigration officer, the officer paused. He looked at the passport, then at his official list of recognized nations, then back at the passport. He called over his supervisor because the country listed on this man's perfectly authentic-looking passport was a place called Taured, a country that did not exist on any map on Earth. The man, however, insisted it was real, and the documents he carried seemed to prove it. This was the beginning of a strange and unsettling encounter that would end with an impossible disappearance, leaving behind a story that, to this day, has never been fully explained. But before we start our story, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any of our new, incredible stories. To understand the setting for this bizarre event, we must picture the world in 1954. This was the absolute height of the Cold War. The world was starkly divided between the Western Bloc, led by the United States, and the Eastern Bloc, led by the Soviet Union. Espionage, paranoia, and political tension were at an all-time high. International travel was becoming more common, but it was not the casual affair it is today. It was a serious, formal process, and security at international borders was incredibly tight. Every passport was scrutinized, every visa was checked, and any anomaly was treated with the utmost seriousness. Japan, in 1954, was a nation in the midst of a remarkable transformation. Less than a decade after its devastating defeat in World War II, it was rapidly rebuilding under American occupation. Tokyo was re-emerging as a major hub for international business and diplomacy. Haneda Airport was a symbol of this new Japan, an orderly, modern, and highly regulated gateway to the rest of the world. It was not a place where irregularities went unnoticed. Into this formal and tense environment stepped the man who would come to be known as the Man from Taured. He was a middle-aged Caucasian man, conservatively dressed in a business suit. When it was his turn at the immigration counter, he presented his passport with confidence. The immigration officer who inspected it was immediately perplexed. The passport looked completely authentic. It was not a forgery. It had the correct texture, the official-looking seals, and, most convincingly, it was filled with genuine entry and exit stamps from numerous other countries in Europe and even from previous business trips to Japan. But the country of issue, printed clearly on the cover, was Taured. The officer, having never heard of such a place, politely asked the man to point to his country on a world map. The man, now looking slightly irritated by the delay, immediately pointed to the mountainous region on the border between France and Spain. He pointed directly at the location of the Principality of Andorra. He insisted, however, that the country was not Andorra, but Taured, and that it had been a recognized nation for over 10 years. The immigration officials were now deeply suspicious. They escorted the man to a secondary interrogation room for further questioning. The situation grew stranger by the minute. The man spoke multiple languages, including French, Spanish, and, according to reports, fluent Japanese, which he used to argue his case. He was indignant and genuinely confused by their ignorance of his homeland. He couldn't understand why his proud nation of Taured was not on their map. The officials decided to examine the contents of his briefcase and wallet to search for more clues. What they found only deepened the mystery. His wallet contained a mix of several different European currencies. He had a driver's license issued by the government of Taured. He even had a checkbook from a Tauridian bank, a bank that, of course, did not exist. Everything about him was internally consistent. He had a complete set of perfectly legitimate-looking documents from a country that simply was not real. The interrogation continued for hours. The officials pressed him for details of his trip. The man explained, with growing frustration, that he was in Japan for a routine business meeting. He provided the name of the Japanese company he was scheduled to meet with, and even the name of the executive at the bank where he had another meeting planned. The Japanese officials, following protocol, made the calls. The results were chilling. The Japanese company he claimed to be visiting had heard of the international company he said he worked for, but they had no record of the man himself and certainly no meeting scheduled with him. The bank had never heard of him, and his own company, the one he claimed to represent from Toward, did not appear to exist. The officials were at a complete loss. They were faced with a man who was not a typical illegal immigrant or a bumbling spy with a forged passport. He was intelligent, articulate, and seemed genuinely baffled by the situation. His documents were not forgeries of a real country. They were seemingly authentic documents from a non-existent one. Was he an incredibly elaborate con man? Was he mentally unstable? Or was he something else entirely? Unable to either verify his story or charge him with a specific crime, the officials made a decision. They would detain him overnight while they contacted other international agencies and tried to solve the puzzle. They booked him a room at a nearby hotel that was often used for such purposes. They confiscated his documents and his passport, placing them in a secure safe at the airport. The man was then escorted to his hotel room. The room had only one window, which had no balcony, and was several stories above the busy Tokyo street below, making an escape impossible. To ensure he didn't disappear, they posted 2 immigration guards directly outside his hotel room door for the entire night. The man was given a meal and told that the investigation would continue in the morning. The door was locked from the outside. The 2 guards took up their positions in the hallway, ready for a long and uneventful night. The mystery of the man from Toward was at its absolute peak. Officials were convinced that the morning would bring some clarity, that under further questioning, the man's strange story would finally fall apart. They were wrong. The morning would not bring clarity. It would bring impossibility. Of course, let us continue the story and uncover the impossible conclusion to the mystery of the man from Toward. Here is the second and final part of the script. As the sun rose over Tokyo on that July morning in 1954, the immigration officials prepared for another day of questioning. They were confident that with some pressure, the strange man's elaborate story would crumble, revealing him to be a spy, a con artist, or simply a man suffering from a grand delusion. The 2 guards, having spent an uneventful night in the hallway, were instructed to retrieve him from his room. They knocked on the door. There was no answer. Louder this time, still, only silence. A feeling of unease began to grow. Using a master key provided by the hotel manager, they unlocked the door and cautiously pushed it open. The room was empty. The bed had been slept in, but the man himself was gone. A frantic search immediately began. The officials checked every corner of the room. The single window was still locked securely from the inside. There was no balcony to climb down from, and the room was on a high floor, making a jump impossible. The door had been the only way in or out, and it had been under constant guard all night. There was no sign of a struggle, no hidden panels, no possible means of escape. It was as if the man had simply dematerialized into thin air. The guards swore that no one had entered or left the room. The mystery deepened even further when officials at the airport went to retrieve the man's confiscated passport and documents from their secure office. They unlocked the safe where the items had been placed. The man's passport, his strange driver's license, and his non-existent checkbook were also gone. They had vanished from a locked safe in a government office. At the same time, the man himself had vanished from a locked and guarded hotel room. The entire case had evaporated, leaving behind only the bewildered memories of the officials who had interrogated him. There were no official reports filed, no public announcements made. The case of the man from Toward was quietly and unofficially closed, becoming a hushed and baffling legend within the halls of Japanese law enforcement. With no official explanation, the story of the man from Toward has, over the decades, become a fertile ground for countless theories, each attempting to explain the inexplicable. The most mundane explanation is that the entire event was an elaborate and brilliantly executed hoax. In this version of the story, the man was a highly skilled con artist or spy who had a specific reason for testing the Japanese immigration system. He may have had an accomplice inside the hotel who helped him escape, or he may have been a master lockpicker and escape artist. This theory, however, struggles to explain the documents. To create such a high-quality, internally consistent set of documents from a non-existent country would be an immense undertaking, and it fails to explain how his documents also vanished from the airport's secure office. Another rational theory points towards a simple yet profound misunderstanding. The name Toward is phonetically similar to Tuareg, the name of a large nomadic ethnic group in North Africa. Is it possible the man was a member of this group and his country of origin was misheard or misspelled on his documents? This could explain the existence of a strange, unrecognized nationality. The most compelling location-based theory is its connection to Andorra. On the map, the man pointed directly to Andorra. In the local Catalan language, the Principality of Andorra is often referred to as simply the Lands of Andorra. It is possible that Toward was a mispronunciation, a misunderstanding, or even an archaic name for a specific region within Andorra. Perhaps the man was from a small, isolated valley with an old local name that was not internationally recognized, and he simply could not comprehend why the wider world did not know his home. But even these theories, as plausible as they may be, cannot explain his impossible disappearance from a sealed room. This is what has led to the most famous and enduring explanation, the theory that has turned this story from a simple cold case into a modern legend. This is the theory that the man from Toward was an interdimensional traveler. The idea posits that there are an infinite number of parallel universes, each one slightly different from our own. In another reality, on another version of Earth, history unfolded differently. Perhaps the Moors held on to Spain for longer, or a different treaty was signed between France and Spain, resulting in the creation of a country called Taurid, in the place where our maps show Andorra. In this theory, the man was a completely normal businessman from his own reality. His documents were real, his company was real, and his country was real in his dimension. He had, through some unknown cosmic anomaly, a glitch in the matrix, accidentally slipped from his universe into ours. He was as confused by our world as we were by him. His impossible disappearance was not an escape. It was him slipping back into his own dimension, just as accidentally as he had arrived, leaving behind nothing but a baffling memory. The story of the man from Taurid first began to spread outside of Japan in the mid-20th century, becoming a staple in books and magazines dedicated to paranormal events, unexplained mysteries, and Fortean phenomena. It was featured in books like The Directory of Possibilities by Colin Wilson and Strange Destinies by Jacques Bergier, where it was presented as a factual account, a documented case of a visitor from another dimension. From there, it spread into the popular culture, and in the modern era, it has become a legendary story on internet forums and mystery-focused YouTube channels, a perfect piece of evidence for those who believe in the existence of parallel worlds. In the end, there is no definitive proof that the event ever truly happened as described. There are no official government records, no newspaper articles from 1,954, and no named witnesses that can be independently verified. But whether fact or fiction, the story of the man from Taurid endures for a reason. It is a perfect mystery. It presents us with a set of facts that seem real and believable, and then introduces an element that is utterly impossible, forcing us to question the very nature of our own reality. It is a thought experiment with a human face. The story's power is not in its truthfulness, but in the profound and unsettling questions it forces us to ask. Are we alone? Is our reality the only one? And could a simple, wrong turn in the fabric of space-time cause someone to end up at an airport in a world that is almost, but not quite, their own? The man from Taurid, whoever he was, left behind no evidence, only a tantalizing and eternal question mark.